Hello, hello, hello. Hi, Ashton.
Yeah, Ayana.
It's so good to see you. It's been a little bit now. It's been a
Yeah,
little
I know.
while. Lots have happened. Lots and lots has happened since we last got together. So welcome everybody to what is now part 3 of the Discomfort Club. Welcome. It's good to see you all.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah. So Ashton, you and I, as always, right before we get onto these live conversations, we start having our own conversation that morphs, okay, and it snowballs. And then before we know it, it's time to go live. And so we have to go all the way back to the beginning of what our original conversation was. And of course, especially if you are here watching us on either Facebook or LinkedIn Live, we want you to be a part of this conversation. So please join in. You can use the comments. I'll be sharing some of those comments, and you can also post your questions there, which I will post live for us to answer. But today we have several things that we're talking about, including why so many women are experiencing invisibility and other things. So comment, let us know where you're watching from. Again, if you have questions, let's start there. Maybe let's start here though, because we're already almost in August. And so that means we have now celebrated Pride Month. Hopefully we have celebrated both Juneteenth and the 4th of July. And so since we're just now catching up with one another, I wanted to hear from you, Ashton. What did you do? How did you celebrate? And then I'll share with you maybe some of the ways that I celebrated.
Well, I'm already uncomfortable because I left the country. I got invited to give a talk in London in mid-June and used that as an excuse to stay in Europe for 2 weeks and avoid the whole thing. I actually came back on July 2nd because I love fireworks. Yeah. And this is really awful to say, but now that my in-laws are dead, we don't have to go to their house in Connecticut anymore. So I went to a dance party outside and enjoyed the fireworks.
That's fun.
Yeah, I'm ambivalent about the 4th of July because I'm ambivalent about being American, because I'm deeply ambivalent, to put it politely, about a lot of the things America represents in the world, and the cherry on top being sort of our proud ignorance about that fact, this idea of American exceptionalism, that somehow the world should learn from us. And I think we should learn more from the world. So I'm not proud of the fact that I basically ran away from it, but that's what I did.
Okay, well, you have the right to do that, right? And I'll just say this. I have noticed in recent years, I'm going to say in the last 5 to 6 years, that although people may be celebrating the 4th of July, I don't see the whole rah-rah go America the way that I used to. And I really think this is because people are questioning who we are as a country, what we stand for, what we have always stood for. And I think that 4th of July is one of those holidays when we're talking about independence, right?
When did it change for you?
You know what? I don't know that it changed for me specifically, because I think in the Black community, we've always been like, okay, whatever. I'm just gonna be real with you, okay? I think that we have always celebrated 4th of July as a family holiday and not a uniquely American Independence Day. I just don't believe that we have done that, because we are very aware of who Independence Day was for and who it was not for. So, I'd love to hear from some of you if you are watching, if you're able to comment. Specifically, I don't always see your Facebook comments. Sometimes they do come up. So those folks who are watching on Facebook, please join the conversation. Of course, if you're on LinkedIn, hello to those of you watching from Saginaw. I'll just tell you that I want us to do a quick reading, okay, that came from Frederick Douglass, a speech that he wrote. And he addressed dignitaries, okay? He was asked to speak on Independence Day, okay, about Independence Day. A Black man, okay, when other folks were enslaved. And so I just want to read this really quickly, and then we can return back to that conversation really about both 4th of July and Juneteenth. So this is what he says. On July the 5th, again, he was asked to come and speak to these dignitaries, these folks, these statesmen, okay, about Independence Day. And he said, this is long, but I'm going to just read this part. He says, the blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought light and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. I don't think a lot of people know about that speech. And I think people are even less aware that Independence Day did not include all people of the United States.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
Um,
I actually heard a bit of it. Someone recorded a version of it being read by, I think, 6 or 7 of Douglas's descendants.
wow.
And it's very powerful to hear these children and teenagers. And it's very, very powerful. I mean, the speech is incredibly powerful. And I think, I think we all need that reminder that it wasn't freedom for everyone by any measure. I'm curious about Juneteenth, which you put on the banner, because I have to say, I am thrilled that Juneteenth exists. I mean, I remember the struggle to get Martin Luther King Day in the calendar. So thank heavens for that. But I'm aware that it's Juneteenth, and I'm thrilled that it's Juneteenth, but I don't feel it's my holiday to celebrate. It feels like appropriating or something. What do you think of that? It feels, as usual, uncomfortable to say that.
Yeah, but this is why I'm so glad that you and I have these conversations. And I'm glad that you have the guts to say that, because a lot of people think it, but they won't say it. It is a holiday for everyone to celebrate. And I'm going to tell you why. Although this holiday is uniquely African-American in that it is a holiday that represents the liberation of African-American people. The thing is that people don't understand Juneteenth was uniquely a Texan holiday for many, many years. And I read a book, a really good book, that I know I have around here by Annette Gordon Reed. It's going to be backwards on here, so you can't see it, but it's called On Juneteenth. And she talks about how maybe as a Texan, she wasn't always so excited when the rest of the nation started celebrating Juneteenth because they understood it differently, right? So what you hear a lot of people saying right now, because it is a national holiday, is folks both Black and white and other, okay, will say that Juneteenth is a day celebrating the emancipation of Black folks. And it's like, well, wait a minute. That had already happened 2 years earlier. What Juneteenth signifies is when Major, I think his name was Gordon Granger, maybe. I may be getting that wrong. Historians, you'll let me know. But basically, it was when these folks came in to actually make sure that the laws that had already been in place, that emancipation was happening in Texas, because it had not been. So what you'll hear people saying sometimes is that enslaved people in Texas didn't know. They didn't know they were free. That's not true. Okay, that's not true. Many people did know, but what were they going to do about it? When they were living in a state that was hostile towards them, where were they going to run to? Who was going to help them? Okay, so Juneteenth is actually when this major came in and they enforced what had already been said, which is you cannot legally enslave these people any longer. And so this is why this is a celebration, because this really does mark in history when all people were finally emancipated. And it is a holiday that we should all acknowledge. Now, what do I think that non-Black people should do on this day? Celebrate with other folks, but make sure that you are prioritizing learning. Prioritize the learning of this history, which doesn't really happen a lot, especially because, we're so siloed. And, if you are a non-Black person that doesn't have non-Black people in your life, you might not learn these things. So I'd like to hear from some of you. How are you all celebrating, or did you celebrate Juneteenth and the 4th of July?
And I'm having some trouble with the audio.
Okay, so I was just asking folks if they could, if they would, if they felt comfortable to let us know how they celebrated both 4th of July and Juneteenth. And I was saying that this is a holiday for all Americans. We should be celebrating Juneteenth. And if you are a non-Black person, I think you should prioritize learning on this uniquely Texan day that is now a national holiday. I do think that. So tell me why you felt like you couldn't celebrate Juneteenth before. Is it because you felt like it was like a uniquely Black holiday specifically?
I guess so. I guess so. That it felt like appropriation. But what you say makes complete sense, of course. Why is it different from the 4th of July? And that is sort of the point, is that it took that long for people to make sure that everyone, including, of course, Black citizens, got the memo. And it is, as you say, a learning opportunity for white people to celebrate the day, but make sure they know what it is actually about.
Yeah. Yeah. Find out what it's about. I just want to put up what someone said here really quickly. Ashton, I think you might be frozen, but I know you'll come back. This LinkedIn user says, on a plane all day on 4th of July, great fireworks across the country, and Juneteenth was amazing. This person is talking about how they celebrated. Had a great time with all my peeps and some awesome food from all the aunties. Let me tell you how I know this person is probably Black, okay? Because this person is talking about the aunties. Okay. So thank you, LinkedIn user. Feel free to put your name and let us know who you are and how you are celebrating. But whenever you hear about people talking about the aunties, they're usually Black or brown. So I love that. But I hope, okay, folks from the Black community, if you too have folks who are non-Black in your networks, okay, in your friend groups, in your community, and I use the word community very personally. If you have these folks in your community, bring them along, okay? Very much in the way that I just spoke with a friend who it's a growing friendship with someone from the LGBTQ community last night. And we were talking about Pride Month. Okay. And she had invited me to a parade and a celebration. And very much like you, Ashton, I have to say, I was uncomfortable and really told her, I said, I'm going to tell you the truth. One of the reasons that I didn't show up because I felt like I would be encroaching upon a space that was not mine. Right.
Yeah.
I am not a part of the LGBTQ community, although I advocate strongly for their rights and support them. I didn't feel like it was my place to be there. And in the same, yes. And in the same way, I'm telling you, come on to the Juneteenth celebrations and learn. She said the same thing to me. Next time you better show up. Right. That's what she told me.
Yeah.
So,
wonderful. We have a question from Yvette about, is it for UK listeners? That's a good question. The Britain too has been doing a lot of reckoning media outlets with their past in slavery and in the homes of wealthy people who, of course, earned a great deal of their wealth through the slave trade. So it could be part of. I'm sure there are equivalents of some in some way in the States. And that reminds me also your point about aunties. When I heard that, I did jump to the assumption that the person who wrote that wonderful comment was African American. It's also common in I have a friend from Singapore who refers not just to her biological aunts, but to the older women in her life as her aunties. So it's it's often more widespread than we assume.
Yeah, right. And I love that. It's a term of endearment. I'm an auntie right now. Okay. I am an auntie biologically, but I do have other people from different platforms that may call me an auntie. And I'm like, well, thank you. Thank you. So
I'm down with it.
Right. I see some really great comments here about Juneteenth, and I'll put up another one. But I really am interested in hearing from those folks who are non-Black also, who are watching either on LinkedIn or Facebook. Did you celebrate? Did you celebrate 4th of July? Okay. Did you celebrate Juneteenth? Why or why not? Yvette P says, is this topic going to be for this is what you're talking about for the UK listeners. It's for everybody. It's for everybody. And I can't really speak about whether UK or not celebrates. I would think that they don't, because this is again, uniquely Texan holiday that is now national. But I think that everybody should learn about it. So that's just what I think about it. So, what else has been going on, Ashton? I know you did a little bit of travel. You said that you were out of the country and you're out of the country right now. Tell me what you've got going on.
No, I'm in Los Angeles, where I attended a conference, all-day conference yesterday, sponsored by the SCAN Foundation on equity in healthcare, which really means, as we know, better access to healthcare for people, without privilege, Black and brown people primarily. And the glaring example is how many people of color died of COVID. When, age is a risk factor for COVID. Our bodies are more vulnerable. Race should not be. That happened because of the effects of systemic racism. So there are all these people in the room. It was fantastic, talking about population aging and how to make, the kind of preventive care we need, et cetera, et cetera. And I met a ton of interesting people. The one encounter that left a bad taste in my mouth was that there was a reception at the end, and I was sort of handed off to this older white man who worked for a foundation. And he said, I am looking at my little notes here. He said, he said, well, he wanted to point out that getting access to healthcare could be harder for people with privilege because they didn't get the benefits automatically. They had to apply for them. And my jaw probably didn't drop, but I was like, really? You have spent an entire day at this conference listening. Almost everyone on every panel was a person of color, which was, talk, and there were community members. It was about listening to the people, and it was people in rural areas talking about the issues of their communities. There were indigenous people living this inequity. And I was like, where have you been all day? And how could you possibly, in that framework, say to anyone here that being privileged, it makes your life harder? And I wondered whether I should have confronted him, but I just said something about how I had to get another glass of wine, which I probably did after that comment.
Drive you to drinking, right? So let me ask you this. Were you more surprised than irritated, or were you not surprised but still irritated? Which one was it?
I was astonished. Yeah. And I guess that shows sort of my narrow-mindedness, because I'm just assuming everyone there was sort of ideologically, I don't know his ideology, but would have been a little more knowledgeable. Perhaps I should be grateful that he wasn't so busy being politically correct that he said what he actually thought. But I will say, and I'm not proud of this, but the thought that came to my mind was, I am not spending 10 more seconds with this guy. He's well connected. It was a small invitation thing, and he's here because he thinks he's doing the right thing, or the people who invited him think he's doing the right thing. Yeah. I'm not going to change. I didn't even think about whether or not I could change his mind. It was just like, waste of time. I'm going to go talk to all the other really interesting people in this room.
So I do have some thoughts about this, right? Because on the one hand, I feel you. And I say to myself, I'm not spending my time with people who are willfully ignorant, okay, or who are looking to confirm what they already think, even what they think is bullshit and probably not true. I don't want to spend my time with people like that, and my time is valuable. But on the other hand, if I have a responsibility to really help push equity, okay, to help people understand equity, and it is someone from my community that is a Black person who is saying things that are inappropriate or prejudice or any of those things, okay, I'm probably going to say something. I'm probably not going to say something to somebody who's white, because again, I'm not going to have these conversations with someone who is hell bent on not understanding me. All right. But I do think that white folks have a responsibility to say something to other white folks when they are dead wrong. And I think it is too easy to walk away. And I also think that of course we have to protect our mental health too, right? Like I'm certainly not saying you've got to engage with every person that says something foul and ignorant, and it's your job to do that. But I am saying that too often I think that white people do not want the responsibility of other white people, but they damn sure want Black people to be responsible for all Black people. Okay. I have had people ask me to answer. I'm going to give you a really good example right now. We were not planning on talking about this, but this whole Carly Russell case right now, and you've been out of the country and you're just not coming back, and then you were over in California, you may not know. And listen, you might not know because sometimes it's good not to be listening and engrossed in the news all day. But there is a case, and just look up Carly Russell. Some of you know what's going on. But the way that people are expecting for all Black people, okay, to somehow be speaking for what this woman did or didn't do, ridiculous to me, offensive to me, okay? Because I have been a witness to how oftentimes people in majority culture, i.e. white folks, they want to be seen as individuals, but they want Black people to answer for all Black people, and they don't understand when they're doing that. So I say to white folks, especially those of you who are advocates, who call yourselves allies, who really and truly think of yourselves as allies, you are part of a collective. And so when somebody in the collective steps out of line, guess what? Bring them back, pull them back. And you might not do that all of the time, right? But I do think that is something that, we're talking about being uncomfortable right now. That is something that is uncomfortable, but I think it is so necessary.
Really,
have an opportunity.
I'm going to repeat what you said because it's so powerful. And that's, if I'm not answering my email, I'm taking notes, that white people often don't expect to be responsible for each other's positions, but expect Black people to answer for all Black people, to represent the whole community. And therefore you can't be seen as individuals. So, and he's a white guy. I'm a white woman of relative privilege. I bet he, is a lot fancier than I am, but still, I was not at risk. I wouldn't have lost anything other than having to delay that glass of white wine by 15 seconds, which I really could have handled, to say, gee, that seems like a curious position, given what we've heard all day about people without access to healthcare really suffering, whereas, wealthy people have the option to pick up the phone.
Yes.
And pay for it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for, always putting yourself out there. And that's what it's about. That's the name of the game. And so, of course, these discussions, this Discomfort Club does not happen without you. So I see lots of comments here. I'm going to put up a couple, but I'm also going to encourage you to ask your questions, okay? Because that's what we are here for today. And I just see one from Angel Gibson, so I'm going to put it up here. Angel Gibson, hi, Angel. She says, yes, I learned from Ayana. If you don't say anything, at least saying, wow. Okay, I know what she's talking about. What makes them realize that you aren't comfortable with that? I think what she's saying is that makes folks know that you're uncomfortable with what they're saying. Which brings me to a question that I got today via email. And it really wasn't a question. It was more of a statement. And this person was talking about how they approach, and this was coming from a white woman, and she was asking me how she should approach other white people in a community that she's in about how they are not diverse. Specifically, they aren't racially diverse. They do not have folks with disabilities represented, even though this is an organization that is really advocating for folks with disabilities, okay? And I think what she was really asking me was, how does she approach this in a way that does not offend them, that does not maybe, sound accusatory? And what I said to her was, as long as, and you and I have talked about this before, Ashton, as long as we are prioritizing the feelings of the majority, we can't also be advocating for those who are not in the majority. We can't. You can't have it both ways. Okay. So part of what we need to do is, I'm not even going to say get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that might not ever happen, but you do it any damn way. You speak up any damn way, especially when you are in circles of influence. I literally just left an organization, okay? An organization that I've been part of for 5 years because people were not willing to do the right thing. And I'm gonna tell you something: racism, bigotry, ableism, ageism, all of it. It is expensive. It's expensive. And it
It's
might
hard.
not cost you on the front end, but baby, it's going to cost you. It's going
Yeah.
to cost you. It's going to cost you your reputation, because it's going to come back. People are going to remember. Oh, remember when you said this thing? Remember when you did this thing? I know I'm going to remember. Okay. So we have to be willing to say what needs to be said and not look for when it's the right time, because the right time is now. It really is.
Could she have approached it? I mean, if it's a majority white group,
Mhm.
and able-bodied and all the things, if that is her identity, it seems to me then she is part of that majority, and she can say, I've noticed this, that we don't really represent the communities that we are hoping to serve. How could we change that?
Mhm. That's a
And
really
then
good way to pose it.
she's not finger wagging. I mean, I think about this morning, noon, and night because I and my colleagues at the Old School Clearinghouse are embarked on figuring out how to reach it. The movement is largely white. It's largely, shocker, membership's probably the biggest block is older white women, like guess who? Me. Why is it so white? I got a beautiful answer to that question from at Discomfort. So there were so many people of color. So see, I didn't talk to that white guy because there were other people that were more important for me to talk to. How's that for a defensive rationale?
Okay, well, that's one. Okay,
Can you give me a
you're only gonna
tenth
be
of
able to use that one time. You got your gimme right there.
okay,
That
all
was
right.
it.
I'll cash that chip there. I'm putting
That's
it in the
it.
bank. But really, it was fantastic to be. That's why I flew across the country to attend it. A woman named Janet Spears, who's African American, and I said, we really are reaching. Would you agree? Would you recommend some people to talk to when we begin the outreach part of this project to people who are underrepresented, to say how can we make our work valuable to you? Help us address this, and pay you for your time. And she said her right off the cuff answer was, Black people have always known how to take care of our elders.
Yep.
And this leads into something we were going to talk about, which is squishy and uncomfortable for me to talk about, but about how prejudice and discrimination harms even the people who have an advantage because of it, the people who are perpetrating the discrimination, the people who have a leg up in that system. One reason that is the case is that people with more wealth can afford institutional care for our older people, and it's complicated. I'm on thin ice here because it's not better or worser. I'm sure are families that are stuck with caregiving responsibilities that are tremendous hardship for them, and economically and in terms of their own well-being, et cetera, that deserve the same option.
Yeah.
But it is a case, I see it also in Indigenous communities where older people remain integrated into the communities, and that these communities invoke their ancestors. And that would, I'm going to be an ancestor not too long from now. It would comfort me to think that there was some ritual way every so often people would invoke the people who came before me. Just, oh yeah, I miss mom because I can't find where the something or other is.
Right.
And those are impoverishments for people in the dominant culture, if you will, who can afford ways out of that. Can you help me here? Did that make sense?
It does make sense. And we can have so many conversations, like just tales off of just that. But I think about that too, because I know that we both work with folks who are in healthcare and who are specifically in aging services. And specifically for me, I came out of the senior living industry before I started my own practice. And I still work with folks in the senior living industry because I love that industry. But when you talk about inequality, when you talk about wealth inequality, when you talk about care, you cannot have those conversations and not talk about racism. You just can't. You
sexism, because
and
women
sexism.
almost do all this unpaid work or
Yes.
poor work.
Yes. And so, I am very concerned about the future of care for older adults, because people who cannot afford to live in luxury sort of communities, where does that leave them? In understaffed nursing homes where people may not give them the care that they deserve and the care that they need, and what are those people, those majority people, are going to be? I don't even remember what the question was now, Ashton, because now I'm thinking about just how all of this works. But
yeah, maybe, I mean, that would be a topic for another, there's so many, but about caring, who does it, why it's undervalued. The closing keynote was delivered by Ai-jen Poo, who is a hero of mine. She founded the, I think, National Domestic Workers Union. And the average age of home care workers in the US is 49. The average wage, less than $12 an hour. And she is working to get them incorporated in basic labor laws that they were excluded from because of the history of slavery and racism. Social Security didn't cover farm workers or domestic work because most of it was done by Black women.
That's
right. So these things have deep roots.
Yeah. Very deep roots. And so if we go back, I remember what your question was now. Okay. So if we go back and see, doesn't it always circle back? Listen to me, people. It always circles back to racism in this United States. Okay. Because that's where we're going back to, because your question was, how does racism, how does inequality, how does prejudice also negatively impact the people who are enforcing this, who are perpetrators? I'm going to say, number one, it keeps them ignorant as hell. It keeps them ignorant as hell, because when you think that you are on the top all the time, when you think that you are the standard all the time, when you think that people will always come to you for answers, you have no reason to get better, my guy, my girl. Okay. We do not know our own history, but white folks, they do not know the history either. Okay. They know uniquely Americanized. Didn't learn it. And that's nothing to be ashamed about, but we've got work to do, all of us, because racism hurts white folks too. It does. And until they know this, I want to read something really quickly. Okay. Because until they know this, oh my gosh, help me find it. Where is it? Oh,
while you're looking, that was hard for me to get my head around was that patriarchy harms men.
Wasn't it?
Because it's not, it enforces this rigid code of masculinity that is such a limited view of what it means to be human. And that's not good for men. Harms women far more, but it's not good for the people who benefit from it either.
Oh yeah. Because men will eat their own too. Okay. If a man is not in line with male dominance and patriarchy, they'll treat him just like a woman. They might even call him a woman. They might use terms that somehow take away his manhood, right? Because he is not engaging in these practices. That
enforcing the dominance culture.
Yes. Which brings me to this quote by Fania Davis, who wrote a book called Race and Restorative Justice, the Little Book of Race and Restorative Justice. And she says, our failure to reckon with the past precludes our ability to take collective responsibility, folks, transform relationships and social structures, and finally put the past behind us. Yeah, we got work to do. We do. And so as long as we keep pretending that all of these things have happened in the past and we're so progressive, I hate when progressives talk about how progressive we are, because we ain't. We ain't. Okay. And that includes me. I'm doing a lot of work on my own. I've been very, very transparent about that. You and I have talked before about how there is colorism and white supremacy rampant in the Black community as well, too. This happens everywhere. We all have work to do. We really do. And so we need to get uncomfortable, right? And maybe not again comfortable with it, but just get used to it. I don't
Well,
know.
realize it's all a work in progress. We all are, and that you never know enough.
You don't. And you will never know enough. To me, if my goal is to always be fair and just and equitable and to see the best in people, that means I'll always be learning. Which takes me back to racism, right? If you think that you are always on the top, if you think you are always on the standard, if you think that you are what people attain to be, guess what? You will stop learning because you think you know it all. It's hurtful. It's not good. And so I want to talk about something else because we talked about this terrible man, okay, who said this terrible shit at a conference where he should have been learning something, but he wasn't. Okay. I learn from you all the time too, whether I'm, watching what you're doing on Old School or you're on Facebook a lot, whatever you're doing. I learn from elders in general. Okay. No matter what their colors are. I am very interested in hearing from the older community from older adults. I think it's important. And so you brought up invisibility to me. And so I just want to put up this banner for a second because I think that is something that we should talk about.
And racism and ableism and sexism are all part of that conversation too. It's always about the structures around us. I just want to say, especially in this context about intersectionality, I learned so much from young people, and they're, the guy who was pretty clueless, despite a day of when he could have been learning, he was older, so wisdom is not the provenance of the old. I just want to make that clear.
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah. I hear a lot of women saying they become invisible, and the smack on the cheek comment that a friend who works in DEI, a queer white woman, said, invisible to whom? And that was so interesting to me because I think invisibility typically means, in the mainstream, is for heterosexual women who become invisible to the male gaze. Men stop checking them out when they come in the room. But, people in wheelchairs have always been visible to other people in wheelchairs.
Yes.
People in, fat women have always noticed other fat women, women so that invisible to whom was
always
a really good check for me. Invisible to whom and on whose terms. If you have gained part of your identity and happiness in life and no judgment whatsoever from being the va-va-voom, dressing up, walking into a party or whatever and turning heads, that does diminish. And it is a real loss. I never saw myself in the world that way. Sometimes I think if I weren't so flat chested, honest to God, it would have been different. But I think in those formative years, I was so busy feeling, unattractive that I just never learned how to see myself. Who knows, but the voices that say your body needs to look a certain way, your face needs to look a certain way, those are the voices of white supremacy, of fat phobia, and of capital P patriarchy. And as long as we value ourselves in the terms of a system that exists to diminish us, it's going to bite us in the ass. No judgment. It is really, really hard to wean ourselves off that. Because it's everywhere. It's in every advertisement. It's in the constant, Hollywood, you name it. It is everywhere that we need to look young. Women age, quote unquote, successfully. I think I've talked about why I dislike that phrase so much. We can save that for the next club. But women age successfully men age successfully by acting young and acting vigorous and staying sexually potent and all that stuff. Women age successfully by appearing young, which reinforces the whole men are the doers and women are the passive recipient binary, which is not our friend. Reinforces the idea that the most important thing about us is what we look, not our friend, especially as we age, and especially if we're not, thin, white, and young. and
Yep.
cisgender. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people listening already know this, but what I would like to turn the conversation to is women's role in perpetuating this. Because, and I think, I mean, most of the fierce judgment of what women look like comes from other women.
You said that to me before, remember? And because I was blaming it on men, right? Remember, I was like, it's men's fault. I still believe that. And you were like, no, you said it's women, which
Women
was
do more
very
of
much.
it.
Listen, it was very much in line with what my husband says, okay? Because I'll be like, it's men's fault, like why women are doing all this stuff, and he's like, nah, you do that to each other.
Men benefit from it. You know, men benefit from it.
Yeah, they do.
Men aren't going to change it. They're not going to spearhead the change. But I wanted to reference something. There's a woman named Jeannie Ralston who has a group of older women, and they're mostly straight and well off and white, but it's called Next Tribe for women, you know, in later life. And she wrote, I thought, a really brave piece. And I'll just read the first two sentences of it. I knew the male gaze would someday fade away as surely as the headiness of a new shoe purchase does. So I wasn't overly bothered when, in my early 50s, men's eyes began to go right through me like X-ray vision. Much more disconcerting was becoming invisible to other women. Now that was unexpected. And she talks about moving to a new town. She's very social. She said, I've never had trouble making friends, but most of the women in the class were younger, and they were talking about, you know, kids and babysitters in elementary school. And she didn't have that much common ground. But when she went up to strike a conversation, there's always something in common, like, you know, the yoga instructor, they ignored her. And, you know, we women need to reach across. Class is hard. You know, experience is hard, but age doesn't, she's in the same yoga class, right? There's always things in common, or you may like someone or not like someone, but her age isn't going to be the reason. And
Right.
if more older women had younger women friends, we would be reminded of how hard it is to be young, because it's easy to be envious and resentful. But the problem is patriarchy. The problem is not that young woman is turning heads. The problem is the system has devalued the older woman. And if more young women were friends with older women, they would see how aging is a source of power and liberation. Once you're, you know, sort of get over that a little bit, and you may not get over it, and maybe we shouldn't get over it, you know, but we women need to work together to change the culture.
Yes. And you know what I'm going to circle back to? Okay. When you say women, all women. Okay. So I think it is so fascinating for me personally. Okay. I've told you before, I live in the Downriver area, but the Downriver area where I live, okay, it's called the Downriver area. Very segregated. All right. I know people don't like to hear that, but it is. It is. All right. I live in an area where it is predominantly white. Most of the people that I know here, most are white women, right? I'm probably the only black person they know. I'm probably the only black friend they have. And let me tell you what I have been noticing. Okay. And I'm noticing it on purpose now. When I am with people, when I am with white women, okay, it just happened the other day. I'm trying to figure out if I'm gonna say something to this person or not, because I might just be like, done, which I'm also trying not to do. I'm trying to give people the benefit of the doubt, right? But I do notice that sometimes when I am with with a white woman and she is approached by other white women that she knows, you know, I could be sitting right there. She might not say a word, might not introduce me, might not say, hey, this is my friend, this is my neighbor, this is my so-and-so. I'm noticing that. Because you want the shine. Okay. You want to be around me. You want to get what you can get from me. Like, we always have very good, this person specifically, I always have very good conversations with her about race. And I enjoy talking to people who want to learn. But when the rubber hits the road, I'm noticing, girl, you failing every time. And I also think that is because white women don't want to be ostracized by other white women, because women are mean as sometimes. And so I think that sometimes, you know, me and my husband have talked about this before. White folks will ostracize other white people. You know, they don't want to get kicked out. They don't want to get kicked out the group. So, you know, you talk about white or women specifically being better to one another. I'm going to say white women. Okay, uh don't just be better to other white women, don't just be better to them. Who's in your friend group? If you
Yeah.
don't have people of color in your friend group at all, I'm very suspect. I'm very suspect. And I don't call everybody a friend right away. Listen, I might be kicking it with you for years and not call you my friend. Truly, because I think that friendship is demonstrated and not just something that you can say. So, yeah, I think that that's something that women have to work on. Um,
Yeah.
and we have to be willing to hear the hard things sometimes. I know I have to be willing to hear the hard things sometimes. You know what somebody told me? Every time we get together, I don't want to talk about race. And I was just like, well, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to be the friend that you have, because so much of what I experience in life, good and bad, has to do with who I am as a person. Um, if I can't talk to you about what I'm experiencing, maybe you're not the person I should be hanging out with.
Well, it's funny where I go with that is, sometimes like I feel like with you, we have a formal framework here to talk about race, which I so appreciate. In a social setting, it feels almost exploitative to say, "Hi, black friend, let's talk about
Yeah.
racism." Maybe you want to
Yeah.
talk about lemon meringue pie, but I want to talk about race so I can feel virtuous, or so I can feel. This same woman, Janet Spear, was talking about how in the community where, the organization with the best of intentions reaches out to the community, the indigenous people, whoever, has conversations. And she said they are extractive. They take
Mm.
the information that they want, but the community doesn't get anything back. And how do we white
Yes.
women make sure that in our dealings with women of color, we are not being extractive?
That's a good. What do you think? Have you pondered that? And like, maybe because I don't want to give it away. I don't want to give away, because I'm not going to speak for white women, right? I know what would be helpful to me in relationships and what has been helpful to me in relationships. But how do you think you can achieve sort of being engaged with the community and maybe learning from that community, but not taking, but being able to deposit something back? What do you think? How does that happen?
Well, if I knew the answer, I wouldn't have asked the question and put myself in this position. Uh,
We're getting there. Okay. I,
um,
you like, I don't know yet. I'm working on it.
well,
Okay.
I think, I mean, in that the situation, ask always how you would hope to be treated in a similar situation. I think that at a minimum, I would introduce the person with me, because I had it, wrapped into me at an early age. That's what we should do. There was an article that came out just last week in the Harvard Business Review, about how women in the workforce are never the right age. I have a
Mm.
blog post all about it at thischairrocks.com/blog. And guess what? We're never the right shape. We're never the right color. We're too bossy. We're too quiet. We're too this. We're too that. And I did end it with a call to white women to say, when you confront this stuff in your workplace, make sure you don't do it at the expense of any other women, because the mainstream women's movement has a long history of ignoring the issues faced by women of color. What
Mm.
I did not do, because it felt extractive, was to call a couple of Black women and say, can you give me some examples of solid allyship? When have women shown up, white women shown up for you, or failed to? And I
Yeah.
thought, I just that doesn't feel right.
I'm glad that you thought that through. I am, because I think that was the right thing to do. I always tell people, like, unless you are in a close relationship, I'm talking about a sisterhood, okay? Like, I have some non-black women in my life who it's a sisterhood, okay? I know some people who could call me and ask me that, because I don't feel like they're exploiting me, right? Because we've always been having these conversations, because I know about their kids and they know about mine, because it is a true friendship, a true relationship. I always say, when you got to call somebody up that you really don't know, that you've never sat down and had a conversation with, a dinner with, yeah, you're extracting, you're exploiting, you're taking. And I'm so glad that you thought that through. Um, because it doesn't feel good. Like, we know when that's happening. I know when somebody is doing that to me. It don't feel good. So I'm
Can
glad
you
that you thought that through.
can I ask you for an example in this context of allyship at work and its opposite, or sort of performative allyship in,
Oh, I have
where?
so many of performative allyship. So
All
many.
right.
So many, but I'll tell you what feels good. I'll tell you, there's so many things that go wrong. And I'm going to tell you, if you live by this rule, if I am not in close relationship, okay, I don't ask that person anything. Live by that rule and you will avoid a lot of the stuff, okay? You would avoid a lot of the things that you are afraid of, okay? The right thing to do is just know that relationships take time, okay? So when you're in the building of the relationship like we are, you and I talk about things and like let those things happen organically, and then you'll know when is the right time to ask, right? But other than that, if you want to know something, there are so many free resources out here. Okay, people are giving all the answers away. Nobody is hoarding this information and trying to keep it. But what happens is people don't want to do the work. They don't want to go look. They don't want to know. You know, we just want things handed to us, and we want it to be easy, and we don't like discomfort. That's what it is. So we think we're taking the easy road, but really what ends up happening is nothing about this is easy.
And trust takes time. There was,
yes.
I just who yesterday had a quote that I had heard elsewhere from a friend of mine who is in the theater, but has always built multiracial, multi-everything groups and coalitions, that change moves at the speed of trust.
Yeah.
And trust takes as long as it takes. You might establish it very quickly in an extreme situation, but in general, it takes rinse, lather, repeat.
Yes.
Especially where there is an ugly legacy of white people benefiting from Black labor of some sort without giving in return.
Yeah. And I think that people just don't really always understand that it takes time.
I don't.
But it does. It really, really does. If you think about any relationship, any healthy relationship, it didn't form overnight. Like, you had to build trust. I didn't, I didn't just marry my husband. I wasn't like, ooh, Nick King, hey, you're gonna marry him. He was wooing the hell out of a girl. He really was. I was wooing him too, though. Okay, I was wooing him. But it took time. It really did. I think about my good friend Kim, who was on today. I see your comment there, Kim. She's like, yes. It took time for us to have serious conversations. That didn't happen overnight. I have people in my family, extended family. I ain't talking to you about nothing, because we have to build trust. So, I am always very much appreciative when people reach out to me when they are in relationship with me. I am hardly ever appreciative when I feel like someone is exploiting me, when I feel like someone is trying to get something out of me because they gain something from it. Really quick example of how this happened. It was really gross. Okay. Very recently, somebody reached out to me. This is a large organization. Okay. They're putting on a big conference. They have a big headline speaker. Okay. And they reach out and they say, hey, would love to have you come and speak for us. These are the dates. This is where you're going to be. It's going to be exciting. And when I reach out and I'm like, okay, can you let me know what the compensation is?
Really?
Let me know. You know what they said? Oh, we don't have a budget for that. If you don't get out my inbox right now, if you don't get out my face with this foolishness, that's what I mean by it's exploiting. Because you want to get something from appearing to be diverse and inclusive and equitable, but you want me to speak on it for free. If you don't get the hell out of my face, that's what I felt like saying. I didn't say it like that, but that's what I felt like.
The whole history of women in particular being expected to work for free.
Okay, in 2023, if you don't get out of my face. So it's those things. It's the I'm trying to get something from you and I'm going to learn something from you, but I'm not going to deposit back, right? It's wrong. We have to question our motives. I have to question my own motives, right? When I do something, especially when I'm trying to learn about another community, I need to question my motives. So we have to question ourselves. Am I doing this for the right reason?
Yeah, it's complicated. I mean, I just, got an email from some, group of people who belong to a community that I know are generally, the members cost some money and it's like, you do interesting work about aging and would you come like, talk to us for an hour, hour and a half. And, at least like, honestly, do a little bit of work into what I talk about and why you're interested, and at least like suck up to me a tiny bit, do 30 seconds of homework before, but it's complicated because I am an evangelist and I am here to, spread the word. I'm lucky anyone wants to hear what I have to say, but it's like, what I always say, is this a paid opportunity? And it's easier, and it's very gendered. Women have a terrible time asking for what we deserve.
It's true.
And what's that? Right.
It's because I think historically we have been undervalued, so we undervalue ourselves.
Right. I mean, we have a babysitter. I was watching my grandson, and I was out in the early evening, and then I relieved her, and she's a daughter of a friend, and I was getting time to pay her, and she was like, "Oh, she was practically saying like, you don't have to pay me, or you can pay me 10 cents," and I couldn't help myself. I took her by the shoulders, and I said, "This has nothing to do with you babysitting right now. Woman to woman, never offer your time for free.
Ever.
Never."
Yeah. You know what though? I wanna say but, okay?
Okay.
Because I do several times a year, I do host free workshops.
Oh, I do free things all the time.
Yes. So that's different, right? So that's not what we're talking about, people. We're not saying don't ever give it up for free. We're saying when people have means, do not let them take advantage of you. Okay?
Exactly.
Don't let it happen.
Okay,
I tell people all the time, I'm gonna get my reparations. You better believe it. Okay. I ain't doing for free for an organization that I know can pay me. And even I have a hard time talking about money. I'm so thankful and so grateful for the partners that I have because they value me, and they'll be like, "Oh no, come back." Yes, they showed me very early on. I am so thankful for one of my partners because early on I said, "Well, I'll do it for this much." And they right away came back and said, "Let me tell you what we're paying somebody else who doesn't do the work that you do."
Fantastic.
And I was so grateful for that because it really changed my business. It did.
Yeah. There's a woman named Cindy Gallup who, she's in advertising, and
oh yes, I do know Cindy Gallup.
She has a website called Make Love Not Porn, which is pornography with partners who like actually care about each other's pleasure, that do not have magic bodies and so on. That's sort of her sideline, although she's very open about it. Her advice to women, and she's given it to me, when you're wondering how much to charge for something, she says, ask for the biggest number you can say out loud without laughing.
Wow. That's good advice.
It's great advice. It's hard to follow, but you know what? No one ever thought less of you for charging an arm and a leg, and they might gasp and say, "Oh, we can afford a 10th of that," but you would have gotten, a 16th.
That's right.
Or they really can't do it, but they realize like, oh my God, we're incredibly lucky to have this, valuable person to work for us. I ask if the event is, I definitely won't do it for free if people are paying to attend. And also it depends on whether it's free and open to the public. And also there's often something they can do for you that isn't money. They can buy your book. They can promote something you're doing. They can hire someone else to do a different kind of thing that their budget enables them to pay for. You can recommend a friend or whatever.
Yes, there's always something that you can give, and it might not be monetary, but for me, sometimes connections is very valuable. When somebody can make a connection for me that I wouldn't be able to get on my own, baby, the money is going to come. I'm not worried about that. I'm doing all right. But sometimes my issue is that I cannot get in certain rooms. I don't have access to certain communities, right? And certain funders. That is help for me, so yeah, I love and appreciate. Look at what time it is already. I love and appreciate. I know, right? I love and appreciate these conversations every time. There are some comments here.
I'm sweating after this one.
Me too. A little bit, but that's okay. That means this was a good conversation. So thank you to those of you who showed up today. We'll be back in a couple months. We've been doing this bi-monthly and it's been very exciting. Make sure that you connect with both Ashton and I either on Facebook or on LinkedIn. You can send your questions or your comments in. You can, again, connect with either one of us, either place, send questions, send comments. And thank you.
Thank you. We'd love to hear where we, or at least I, got it wrong too. That's really helpful. If you disagree, I want to hear that too.
Yeah. Listen, We're all here together. Come back. This is
Please.
how we continue to engage and broaden our own communities and our own perspectives, is by getting together. So thank you so much for being here. Look in your LinkedIn, look in your Facebook. For some of you, look in your email so that we can let you know when we'll be meeting again. And until then, think about the things that we said today, y'all. Okay. Challenge yourselves. Think about what you think about. Think about your communities and how you can expand them. And for the love of God, be a decent person, okay? It's not hard, all right? Please do that. Enjoy your summer. We'll see you again soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.